Welcome, everybody. I'm Taylor Sharp. We're here at the FileMaker Pro User Group Dallas Chapter June 6, 2025 meeting. We're all glad to be here on this nice, almost summer day. It is beautiful outside, good enough for a wheelie ride. All things are good. On the announcements, I have signed up for Full Access Conference in October. It's going to be kind of like the previous Pause on Air type conferences. Pause will not be held this year. So if you're wanting to do kind of a small unofficial type FileMaker conference, Full Access is the conference to go to. I'm signed up. Did you sign up? I think you
signed up, and you'd be flying into the San Jose airport if you want to be closest.
Okay, good news there. I look forward to being there. Of course, there's some international ones going on this summer and next fall, so it'd be fun to go international travel. So Build, Grow, Learn, got several of you guys giving some AI presentations to that conference in September. Okay, on the technical side of things, FileMaker Server 21.1.5 is out. There's some good things in it. Number one, if you've had the issue with losing themes, it is a problem with FileMaker Server, not FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Server. It affected versions 20 and 21, and it is a nasty little thing that basically zaps all of your themes, and suddenly all your user interfaces look wonky and your users freak out. So it doesn't actually lose any data in the tables or fields, but it's a major problem, and it was a bug in the actual FileMaker server that they have fixed. So if you are on 20 or 21, you certainly want to upgrade to the latest bug fix to make sure that doesn't accidentally happen to any of your databases. It does not happen to most databases. I only had one database of all my clients that it happened to, but once it happens, it keeps happening. There are also some security updates. I think Tomcat and a couple of the other underlying libraries. So if you're one of the security type people keeping for updates, the latest update actually fixed a lot more of those than it usually does. So certainly jump on the update bandwagon for those kind of things. For those of you who don't know, our next meeting is going to be about FileMaker 2025, which is not out, and we're hoping it comes out before next month, because if it doesn't come out, we probably don't have so much to talk about. But we're gambling that it'll come out this month. Go Claris, go, but we can't guarantee it. So, but we're okay. Today we have a special presenter all the way from Denver, Colorado, Mr. Dennis Burnham. He is with ASNAP Burnham Business Development. He has been developing as far, I don't know, how long you
Before you were born.
Probably before I was born. So he knows FileMaker inside and out. The one thing I will say about Dennis that I recognize as a particularly good trait he has is he really knows how to make good user interfaces.
Thank you, Taylor. I am glad to be back here in Texas. I left 4 years ago and appreciate the invitation to come back and talk to you guys in person. Just a little story about something that happened to me when I left Texas a few years ago. I found this book on my bookshelf, and I didn't want to throw it away. I didn't want to take it with me. I didn't need it anymore. It was a gift I'd gotten a few years back. So I sent it to my daughter in San Francisco and thought that maybe she could use it to show the kids what a map really looked like and let them learn a little bit about geography. And she called me one day and she said she's got the map spread out on the living room floor, and they were looking at the map of Africa. And she was telling them how the explorers used to navigate with a sextant, and they used the stars to figure out where they were. And my grandson, who was about 10 at the time, his question was, well, why didn't they just use their phone? So, the last time I was with you to talk about payment processing was in 2017 when we were meeting at the Egg and I restaurant. And I know Heather was there. I don't know if any of the others were there. Maybe Taylor, you were there too. Okay, so maybe you remember. The thing that was the feature that I was focused on at that time was insert from URL. And that was something we had since version number 12. And we'd had it for a few years already. And I was an advocate of using insert from URL instead of paying for one of the plugins that were available to people at the time for processing cards. We didn't get JSON functions until about 4 months later. So the procedure that I was using then, which I'll be showing you today, was using something called direct post, an HTTP URL that didn't require what now can be done with JSON. So I'm going to tell you in advance that the things I'm going to demonstrate with you today are still using that HTTP post procedure. I'm using my merchant processor's API in order to create a merchant account, which I used to have to do manually through their web portal. And you'll see me do that today. But the JSON post for a transaction is not something that I have yet implemented. The integration team that I'm working with in order to make this possible for other developers to do the same thing that I do, they've been a little bit slow at responding to me in the past couple of weeks, and only yesterday did we finally find the typo that was causing me stress for the last week. But I expect that in the next several months, I'll also be integrating the API so that transactions can be processed using JSON if that's your preference. Some people in this room believe that it's a more secure method. I'm not necessarily in agreement, but what I hope to do with this add-on that I built is give you the option to work with it either way. About a year and a half ago, there was a presentation here that I attended remotely that was talking about integrating with Square. And I don't think that any of you would remember that the question that I asked at the end of the presentation was, how much does Square pay you in order to give them customers? And Rafe's answer was, well, they don't pay me anything. So that kind of woke me up to the fact that maybe it's time now, after a number of years, for me to present again what we were talking about back in 2017. And in order to make it more available to other developers, I decided to build my first FileMaker add-on. So it's been a learning process for me also in the process of building an add-on. Out in the world, there are a number of other popular processing systems. Most of the major banks offer people a virtual terminal in their account that they can use to log in and run a credit card charge. A lot of the software platforms like Intuit for QuickBooks and PayPal and Shopify do the same thing. They give you the means to do it. But the problem is that most of them charge too much money. They take advantage of people's ignorance, and customers, especially in the retail world, when somebody opens a restaurant, they're desperate to get their credit card processing taken care of, and they usually don't think of it until the day before they open. They're worried about their menu and hiring their chef and all the kitchen equipment, and at the very last minute they realize, oh, we need credit card processing, so they pay through the nose, and then they continue paying and paying month after month. Stripe and Square are two popular services that are out there, usually for people who work off their mobile phone at something like an art festival that's in the outdoor environment. Or, I know I go into the yogurt shop outside the movie theater, and they've got that little terminal where I just insert my card, and it forces me to give them a tip, even though that's a new thing going on now. And I think that, at least what I've experienced living in Colorado, when I lived in Dallas, I was renting an apartment. In Dallas, I'm a homeowner, and residential people come to either do plumbing work or do irrigation work in the yard, and they all carry iPads now. So mobile people who are not in their own home environment where they have a network are a little bit challenged by what they have to do. So Stripe and Square are like the bigger banks. They're charging people more money than I think is necessary. So what we're dealing with today are three who's who entities. Fiserv is the highest level that I'm dealing with as a person who does payment processing. They're like an enormous bank, and they service all kinds of merchant processors around the country, maybe worldwide as well. The company that I'm working with for building more developer accounts to do merchant processing, which is what we're really talking about today, is called Card Connect. Back in 2017, they were still called Charge Card Services. At the time, I knew the former owner from a previous business we had both been in, and what they helped me with were very attractive rates, and they introduced me to a company in Chicago called NMI, or Network Merchants. And Network Merchants was the only entity I could find in those days that allowed me to do this direct post method. Working with Authorized.net was a tremendous hurdle. I couldn't overcome it, and of course there was no JSON available to us at the time. So I was very happy to find NMI. Compared to Authorized.net, for example, their rates were $5 a month instead of $10 a month. and their per transaction fee in those days was 5 cents instead of 10 cents. So the fees made it an attractive thing, and they were simple to work with. Their user interface was wonderful, and I had no problem working with them in all the years that I've been doing this. So there are a number of benefits that both CardPoint and NMI offer. CardPoint is the gateway service that Card Connect brands as its name. They're both very secure. They both offer excellent interchange rates. They both offer tokenization. And what tokenization means is that when somebody is a repeat customer, their credit card or bank account information gets stored securely. NMI calls it a card vault. I don't yet know what CardPoint calls it, but the idea is that once you process one charge with that particular account number, you can process repeat transactions without having to pass any confidential information. You're just using the customer's ID number. And the point that I want to get across to all of you today is that this offers you the opportunity to earn some passive income. So when you're setting up a customer to work in whatever FileMaker app you're developing for them, there's this benefit that comes back to you month after month for the volume that they do. I don't do that many accounts. A lot of my customers have excuses for why they don't want to charge somebody's credit card. That's fine, but the few who do result in a direct deposit into my company bank account every month. And as I am approaching retirement, I find that to be a benefit that I want to extend to those of you who might consider it as well. The difference between CardPoint and NMI, as I said a few moments ago, is that CardPoint uses an API with JSON, and NMI has this direct post. Otherwise, they're both pretty much the same. They both offer a web portal that you can log into, and you can run reports, and you can see which of your accounts have done more business, and the reporting is all very sensitive and all very user-friendly to set it up. So the question of why am I offering this to those of you who are here and those of you who are logged in online and joining us that way is because you have an opportunity to do more with your FileMaker skills than just do the database. One of the things that I've observed from people who do credit card processing without integrating it into FileMaker is that when the charge is successful and there's a payment and it's going to go into that company's bank account, they have to do something else, which usually relies on their memory, to put a payment record into the database to correspond to the invoice. Otherwise, they don't have an accurate accounts receivable picture of who owes the money. So when you're developing in FileMaker, the last step after you get the successful approval of somebody's credit card is to put a payment record into the system to correspond to the invoice. With electronic checks, it takes a couple of extra days. So in my opinion, the banks that charge too much, they're taking advantage of the ignorance of the customer. And what we can offer them is true love. We're offering them better rates, integrated processing. There's also a security benefit when you build into FileMaker because you have the privilege sets that can dictate which employees are permitted to either run the charge or enter credit card information. And you use all your FileMaker skills to build the security apparatus that's just not available to you from companies like QuickBooks or any of the banks. Now for today, I built a little bit of extra confidentiality into it, knowing that this meeting is recorded. I didn't want any of my keystrokes in the FileMaker application to be visible to people who want to use that. Not that they would, but you never know. So what I've done is I've used the concealed edit box instead of what's normally available where you can see the keystrokes you've put in. Part of the programming that I've done anyway is using a masking script step so that when a card is put into the card vault or even just typed into FileMaker, if it's not being stored for repeat use, it'll mask the card number the way you see it here so that anybody else who's looking over the shoulder of somebody who's in FileMaker can not see the actual number. And the most important thing, I think, is that for customer service, anybody talking to the customer can simply say to them, what we have on file is your Visa card number that ends in 1216, and that at least confirms to the customer what you've got. The concealed edit box that I'm using today just hides all of that for the purpose of today. So I have to go back after today's meeting and undo what I've done in the app to take care of that. The masking is just a simple substitute function to put some asterisks in place of whatever the actual numbers are. This is a little chart that shows you some quick arithmetic of what you can expect. And it's important to understand that you're not dealing with just one merchant account. I would expect that you, like me, like any other FileMaker developer, has multiple accounts who could benefit from this. So when you look at the possibility of earning some passive income every month or every year, you want to consider adding up all the merchant accounts that you could possibly develop under your own umbrella, so to speak. And I should also mention that if you're not working with an account at the moment, maybe you finished the work on their database 3 years ago, they're still using it every day. And this is a way for you to earn some additional income on people who are using your database, even if they're not calling on you to make changes or add new features. So the hierarchy that I want to create for developers around the industry in the FileMaker community is where you see my name over on the left, and I'm only showing 4 developers. I'm obviously hoping to attract quite a few more, and each of them will have as many customers as they can, create and build into their solutions. So the reason why, again, is I think practice what you preach. If you're going to create your own merchant account, you'll be gaining experience in how it's done, and you can certainly advocate to any of your customers that it's something that you do yourself for whatever business you do with your customers. It'll reduce your processing costs compared to whatever you're using now, and the security features will enhance whatever you're maybe not doing right now if you're using a web portal of some kind. If it becomes a question of cost and fees for developers, I will be happy to examine 3 recent statements and make sure that the fees that are quoted to you are better than whatever it is that you're spending right now. So to help you get started, the URL that you see at the top of the screen now is something that you can use to log into the Cha-Ching app that's running on my server. I may change the server after today's meeting, and if I do, I'll update this. Right now, the FMS2 server is running in the basement of my home, and I would like it to be more accessible to everybody than that. It's been working fine. I didn't hesitate to leave it running for today's meeting. What you can see in the upper right corner is the account name and password that you could use to log in. And all that I'm suggesting that you do is create a merchant record for yourself, because that will be my prospect list to get back to anybody who has any interest. And I'm just going to ask you to wait until Monday so that you give me time to make the modifications to it that will be made after today's meeting, like the concealed edit box I talked about a little while ago. If you create a merchant record, this is what's going to happen. On the home screen that you see for Cha-Ching, there's a button that's marked Setup. And when you touch that button, you will see this Hello Developer appear in the button bar at the top of the layout. And the reason you're seeing that is because you're logging in with the username and password that I just showed you. And this is a simple entry screen where you can create your own information that I can use to get back to you. Obviously, I'll need your email. And then you can click on the application button in order to see what an application looks like. Now, it's got 5 tabs, and I'm only showing you one of them. When we get into it, you'll see all of them. But there is a multi-tab method of entering the kind of data that would be submitted for a merchant application. You'll choose your own name from the drop-down in the upper left corner, and then you can explore this application form and become familiar with the kinds of things that your customers might need to provide, and being familiar with them will help you get people started. There's also a PDF example of the entire merchant application form that you can download and refer to that. It's got information about my company in it. I've masked the actual card numbers and I think my date of birth may be visible, but my Social Security number is masked and my driver's license number is masked and so forth. There is a merchant table, which is important for me to discuss with you before I show it. When you install this Cha-Ching app as an add-on, you only need one merchant record because the add-on is installed into some other database, and that database is the merchant. I'm also providing for the possibility of using it as a virtual terminal. So if you want to run the Cha-Ching database on your own server and use it as a virtual terminal that you can use to process transactions from any number of other databases, you're welcome to do it that way as well. It doesn't have to be on the same server as the databases. It can be on any server that's running anywhere, hopefully one that you have control over. And the third way I'm offering it is to do custom development, where you can use the scripts and the schema that's in the Cha-Ching app to just build into your customer's application. It takes a little more time to do it that way. My intention was to simplify the process for people who are maybe a little bit intimidated by, or maybe I should say people who aren't intimidated by working with their own scripts and their own schema. So once you have a set of merchants in the version that you create for yourself, they will be like your own prospect list. So that's what it's going to look like to me if a number of people after today's meeting log into the one and create their own record. And you can see that there's a column that's called a merchant ID number. So I'm making it so that you can build this as a prospect list before you submit their applications. And then when the application is approved and it gets a merchant ID number, you'll be able to differentiate between those who are already approved and those who you still need to work with. This is a little bit of a work in process. I'm not sure that it's going to be updated on Monday, but I'm confident that if I don't update it by Monday, this is what you're going to see. And what I'm trying to do with it is make the ERD diagram in FileMaker as explanatory as possible so that people will understand what the different tables are and what the relationships are that are built into it. I have made the availability of external tables, and what you will see, I think it'll be visible in what I show you today, I'm using one of Richard Carlton's starting point databases as if it was the external database that's using Cha-Ching as a virtual terminal. So the only thing you would have to do is just build that particular table occurrence to point to the accounts and the invoices in some other database. So what I'm showing you here are a set of steps that I think would be your procedure in getting somebody started. First thing is just to learn more about them. Find out how they're doing business now. Find out what their accounts receivable picture is. Are they getting paid promptly? Would they benefit from accepting credit cards? Would their customers want to pay with electronic checks instead of credit cards where the fees are smaller? And then the next step would be to build a merchant account for each client that you think is a good prospect. You'd obtain what we call the MID, that's the merchant identification number. You'd submit their banking information. There's the ability to have separate withdrawal and deposit accounts. So if for some reason somebody wants the money to be deposited into one account, but the withdrawals for their monthly processing fees to come from a different account, they can do that as well. If they had more than one banking account, for some reason, let's suppose they had multiple locations, and each location was using its own bank account, they can just submit a different merchant account for each of those locations. And then you would configure your scripts to work with the payments that come back. I did a study about a year ago for a client of mine in Denver who asked me, could I do something in FileMaker that would give him a cash flow projection? And my experience with banks and checks goes way back to my first days in business when checks were still being sent back to customers with their bank statement every month. My branch manager of the bank that I was working with in New Jersey took me down into the basement of his facility where there were 8 or 9 ladies who were sorting checks into different bank accounts, which ultimately at the end of the month got mailed back. So I thought maybe there's a consistency in routing numbers. so that regardless of which branch of Chase or Wells Fargo somebody's working with, we would know the number of days that it takes for them to process an electronic check, and that way I could build into their cash flow projection the same kind of consistency that they get with a credit card. Typically, with the merchant processors that I'm showing you today, credit cards give them next business day funding, and American Express is one additional day. But with the electronic checks, I thought if I could make the thing work with routing numbers, then I could give him the consistency depending on what the bank was, and it turned out it didn't work. There is no consistency. So what they're doing instead is they're just logging into their merchant account on a daily basis to see which ones are funded. Actually, there's a server script that's doing it for them, and if the check has been funded, then it posts the payment into the invoice. So after you've configured that part and you understand about the 3 or 5 day delay for the ACH funding, then it's just a matter of training the employees on how to use it. And the better your work is in building your scripts and your user interface for them, the easier that training will go. Taylor, did you upload that document yet? The one I sent you? All right, well then I tell you what, if you do it now, that's fine. I asked Taylor to put into the chat the tutorial document that I've made. It's a 17-page PDF file that gives you a literal explanation of the kinds of things that I'm showing you. So it'll be in the meeting chat for anybody who wants to download it. Now, FileMaker Pro add-ons, for some peculiar reason, the icon that you see on the add-on file says plugin. I guess somebody at Claris got lazy and didn't feel like making a new icon for the file, which has the extension add-on. And the way that they get stored in FileMaker is in your application support folder. There's a FileMaker folder, and within that, an extensions folder, and within that, something called add-on modules. So when you receive an add-on, either because I would email you the zip file, or you'll download something from the Claris Marketplace, it gets stored in that add-on modules folder. It's a series of JSON files that are explanatory in different languages, so you can, I'm only making it in English, but people can make their add-ons for any of the localizations that Claris offers. Add-ons were introduced in version 19. And it was my experience since I started working on this that not much has changed, or nobody at Claris seems to know what has changed since version 19. So if you look at Todd Geist's video, which is a wonderful explanatory thing of how to work with add-ons and put them into your file, you'll see that even Todd is saying that there are some things that aren't working quite right, and we hope Claris will address them. But I've been unable to find out whether or not they have addressed them. One example that he mentioned is that button bars aren't working properly. I'm not sure what wasn't working properly. I think the button bar was appearing, but clicking on the button didn't do anything. So I've made sure that my button bars are not button bars, they're just individual buttons to make sure that I'm not bumping into that problem. In the community, there is not much discussion about add-ons, and any of the articles that I've read refer to version 19, or the date on them is back a few years ago. So if you're curious about building add-ons for yourself, you've got some work that you'll have to do to try to figure out what is current. So if we're ready, I can take questions, or we can get right into FileMaker and have you see it.
So I like the general idea, always a fan of passive revenue. And I think the thing that maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on is how the pricing works. Does it tend to be specific to the customer's business, right? So in other words, their volume, the type of transactions, and so forth. Is that right?
The answer is yes. It is relative to their business, and it's also relative to the mixture of cards they receive. So there's something that I've been taught recently, and I'll admit to you that I haven't fully digested it yet, but it's something about an effective rate. The kind of cards is not just Visa, MasterCard, American Express, it's also things like gift cards and loyalty cards and the variety of cards that exist that have 16 digits in them. And the mixture of that is something that they call an interchange rate. Card Connect promises me that their interchange rates are the best available. I've never run into a case in my career yet where I've submitted a merchant application and not found that the rate is better than what somebody's already spending. Maybe I'm lucky that I'm comparing myself to the bigger banks. Typically, the percentage, which is, how should I say this? It's kind of like a false target. It'll be below 3% for sure. Somewhere in the range of 2.2 to 2.9% is where things usually fall when you determine that effective rate. And the first month of processing will tell you what your rates actually are. The person who's been training me for the benefit of today's presentation reminds me that there's a productivity factor and a trust factor that aren't actually measurable. Your customer might be wasting a lot of time and steps in trying to do processing in a different way than integrating it into FileMaker. So that overhead cost is something that you can't quantify precisely, but the benefit of integrating and working with a merchant processor that is secure and trustworthy seems to repay those benefits month after month.
Yeah, that makes good sense. Related follow-up question. So the e-check or ACH transaction, that would be the style where I would go to a form and instead of putting in my credit card information, I would put in my bank account number, my routing number, and then effectively the merchant transaction would pull that money from my bank account.
Exactly.
And then that's why it takes the same kind of, time frame to clear because it has to be pulled and then deposited. Different pricing for that, cheaper than credit card, is that right?
Yes, the fees are usually less than credit card. It's usually a matter of pennies per transaction. But I want to add one other thing to that. I'm going to be showing you some examples of that as we do it today. But there was something about your question that prompted a thought, and I can't remember now what it was. So it'll probably come back to me. Oh, yes, now that I'm looking at you, I remember what it was. You asking the question are a little different from Taylor asking the same question, and that is because Taylor works like I work as a solo enterprise. You have a number of employees. So the question that you didn't ask that I was expecting you to ask is, how do I determine which of my many developers are responsible for the income that you would be getting at the end of the month? And the answer is that you would use the reporting feature in the merchant gateway in order to examine, let's say you ran a report sorted by merchant. Presumably one of your developers is assigned to each of those merchants, but if it's more than one, that would be internal work that you would do if you wanted to take that income and distribute it to your developers, which is an option that you as the company owner would have for yourself. I imagine you could decide that you just want to have that cash offset, let's say, the production expenses you have to make this studio and run this operation, or you could make it a benefit for the people who are doing the work. That would be your decision.
Yeah, great.
So what you're looking at is a small screen, of course, but it gets bigger when we log in. The first thing I'll show you is the tab that I call Introduction. And we'll get my developer assistant out of the way. In the introduction, I realized that reading a lot of text may be difficult for somebody, so I've made it a step-by-step process where they can read one paragraph at a time. And it's basically the same information that's in that PDF file that I've given you. It has a few other little illustrations. So for example, with the FileMaker add-on, I'm illustrating how that actually works. Today I'll be showing it to you. And for the virtual terminal, I built in a little graphic that visually explains what a virtual terminal would do, whether it's running on your own server or on a server somewhere else, and how you could be doing your input either on an iOS device or Windows or Macintosh. And finally, for building any of your own apps, I've made what I think is a little bit of a goofy illustration. It'd be hard to read, but it just shows you that you would be benefiting from all the schema that's in this, which you can copy, paste, import into your own. If I go back to the home and click on application, this is the merchant application that I showed you in a slide a little while ago. It's divided into the business details, the owner's information. If I select one of the merchants I've got, let's use this one as an example. It's got actual data in it. The bank account appears, and if for some reason they're doing withdrawal accounts and deposit accounts separately, check the box and you get the two different sets of fields to fill in. And then finally, the processing information, which isn't all necessary in the beginning to get a merchant ID assigned, but later on it would be necessary to provide the percentages of how quickly you're completing the work for the client and getting it ready. That's wrong. I didn't mean to say you were doing it for your client. It's how they would be completing the services or products for the customers they're selling to, and what portion of the work is electronic, what portion is in person. And then finally, you get to a layout that I haven't really finished yet. I haven't decided whether to leave this little feature in there or not. But what it's doing, for instance, if I want to use the API to look up the various variables that are necessary for ownership types, or let's say I wanted to know the different ones for bank account types, here I'm just accessing the Card Connect API for those different features. The Submit button is what's going to actually submit a merchant application. So because I know that I'm on this one for Pender Pet Retreat, which has all the necessary stuff in it, if I click the Submit button, it will come back to me with a merchant ID. This is the thing that Taylor and I struggled with for a few days in the days before. I can't believe, maybe I shouldn't, I guess it's okay to say this in public. There's a sales code that's assigned to me. And for some reason in their API, it was plural, sales codes. And it wasn't until my plane landed yesterday at Love Field that the integration specialist called me and he said, well, try making it singular instead of plural and see if that works. And like magic, that was all it took. After I got in my rental car, I was thinking, is it possible that I could be the only person who's ever discovered that error in their API? What did the documentation say? The documentation is, yeah, it's wrong. So apparently I'm the first person to discover that. That's happened to me in life before. I was also the first person many years ago to discover that FedEx had their date formats wrong in their online ship managers. So November 1st, 11/1 was the same thing as January 11th, and they didn't have zeros where they belonged. So I must have an electromagnet in me that makes things like that happen. If I go to the setup layout, the first thing available right there, you see there's a partner ID. If you download the eventual app that will be distributed, that's where you would put in your partner ID, which is similar to the sales code that I was just describing. And you would choose whether your deployment is going to be as an add-on or as a virtual terminal. And if it's a virtual terminal, you would put in the name of the database that's external. So in this case, I'm using FMSP for FileMaker starting point. And this tells me that I'm going to need two external tables, one for accounts and one for invoices. Or if it's custom, then I don't have to deal with that at all. For today, I'm going to be doing it with you as an add-on. And this list of variables just tells you the kinds of things that are needed for bank transactions or credit card transactions. And the variables are the elements that get composed into the URL that gets submitted, or eventually it will be the Card Connect API. I've also given you downloadable Excel files to be able to have that entire list of variables, and if you needed to modify it and re-import it, you could. There's a little further explanation here about the processing variables that are used for add-ons. And eventually, what will happen is you'll get to this button called Payments. Now, in the version that you will see when you log in with the username and password that I've shown you, you will not see this button bar button for payments, because I've suppressed that because we're not yet processing payments for you or for anybody else through the app that I'm going to distribute. But when you are using it for your customers or for yourself, you'll always be logged in with full access. You won't be logged in with the username and password that I displayed for you. That's just for you to log in sometime in the next week or so if you want to, in order to let me know that you're interested in becoming a developer who's using it. So if I go to the payments, it's going to be sensitive right away to whether I'm doing it as an add-on or as a virtual terminal and go to the proper layout. If I've made a mistake clicking that button, I can go back to the home. If I click the review button, it will show me recent transactions that any particular customer has had, and I can choose any one of them. I can also sort this list by date or transaction ID or invoice number, whatever I need. And then if I choose this one that I made this morning in my hotel, it'll give me that particular transaction result that occurred. So on the left side of the screen, you're seeing the customer. So in other words, I'm the merchant, I'm also the customer. I'm charging myself for the purpose of this demonstration. And the other thing I was going to say to Steve that I forgot before is that every merchant account has a cutoff time at the end of the day, and you can set your cutoff time. So typically it might be 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. When the batch closes, that's when all the transactions get passed to either the payment processor for ACH checks or credit cards. You know at the time they go into the batch that they're already approved. With checks, you don't know that they're cleared until a few days go by. But for the purpose of the gateway authorizing it by being a valid routing number and a valid dollar amount, that kind of approval occurs the instant that you submit the transaction. So if you were to log in, and I can do that with you a little bit later on after I charge myself something, I will see in the NMI transaction list today's batch. If I decide to void something before the closing time, before the batch closing time, the customer will never see that on their statement. If I charge myself some money and then I forget to log in at before 5 o'clock, or I could use Cha-Ching to void it, if I forget to do that before the batch time, the customer will see it on their statement, but I can run a refund instead of a void the next day. And then they will see both on their statement. Yes, sir.
The question is this in the Claris Marketplace?
The answer is no, it is not yet in the Claris Marketplace.
Okay, so how would someone download it if they want?
I couldn't understand your question.
How do you download if you want it?
How do you?
Download.
Oh, well, I hope you will use the URL and account name and password that I've shown you to tell me that you're interested in doing that, and then I will either immediately send it to you.
You're talking the Paratree URL, right?
Yes. All right. But if I'm not ready to distribute it to you because I have revisions to make based on any questions or comments that come today, it may be a little bit of a delay, so that I want your login to indicate to me that you're interested in doing it. For instance, I spoke with Michael before we started recording today, and he showed me some interest. If he doesn't log in to let me know that, I won't know his email address. I'll forget that we even spoke. So I'm just encouraging people to do that so that they can demonstrate to me that they want more. Eventually, I will perfect the app to the point that I'm ready to offer it as a download. Then I would put it in the Claris Marketplace. So what you will do when you go to this layout that's called URL Builder is you will choose who's the merchant, and I've got a filter here that I can click the reset button and all of my customers will show up. Now I've made it possible for you to import into Cha-Ching your customer list. That doesn't mean that they all are merchants, but one by one you can create merchants accounts for those customers. So if I choose my own account by typing my name in this filter field correctly, I guess I'll have to watch what I'm doing. We'll try my first name. I won't misspell that. Today is D-Day after all, which is Dennis Day. So when I choose the customer, I'm going to do it again. Okay. Now I can go to this thing I've built that's called a URL builder. And in the URL builder, I've made a 4-step process. And I've only done this so that developers working with this app can have a little bit clearer understanding of what it takes to build the URL. It doesn't need to be 4 steps. You could script it so that one script leads directly into another and stitch them together. You will see the URL appear in the lower left corner after I've clicked on these 4 things. So I first decide, am I going to use the minimal set of variables or the total set of variables? Most of the time you wouldn't need the total set, but if there is for some reason a customer who needs one of the variables that's a little bit exceptional, they can do that on their own, and I'll show you where that happens. So the second thing you'll select is what's the transaction type. So the transaction types are a short list. It's either a refund, a sale, a validate, or a void. In the case of NMI, they call it a sale. Card Connect or Card Point, they call it authorized followed by capture. So that will be scripted into the scripts that are built for that API. And then there is a transaction detail. So here, I've got the merchant, I've got the customer, today's date is automatically in there. I made an invoice number this morning with today's date. If I have another reference, let's say I want to call it a membership because that's what's being purchased, I can put in a PO number and, let's just make it $30. So those are the transaction details, and then the final step will show you the variables. Kind of proud of the script that did this. The window that you see quickly opening up in the upper left only pops up there because I'm logged in with full access. An ordinary user, that window is way out in left field somewhere. If you wanted to save your own set of variables and give it a name so that you could use it, then it will be added to this list that you're going to see. I'm going to load the ones that are already checked. And what it lets me do is choose between capture, refund, sale, credit card, sale of a check. I'm going to use the sale of a credit card. And I chose check by mistake, excuse me. So we'll go back to credit card. Now I'm doing it this way for a reason for today's demonstration, and that is that my credit card and my bank information are not yet in the card vault. My credit card is going to be put into the card vault as we do this live. My bank account information isn't yet in the system. So when Steve was asking me before about entry of routing numbers and such, you're going to see that happen. So now that I will choose credit card and press the button for the variables, and I load them, and I choose credit card sale, it tells me the procedure will load the variable set that's named sale credit card. And when I hit proceed, what will happen is the key value pairs will appear in these columns. And the values that you see in the right column are the ones that come from the customer's record. It shows you my address and my city, state, zip, and my credit card information is part of it because it's not yet in the card vault. If I add it to the card vault, you wouldn't even see my address and so forth because all it would show you is the ID number instead. If I click Submit now, it will submit this $30 charge. And I will log into the portal to show it to you. So I'm logging into my merchant account, Now, they already sent me this morning the 6-digit security code that's good for 30 days. That's why it didn't prompt me for that now. And if I click on transaction reports and I submit, let's say, just for today's date, there's nothing that was charged in the settlement batch, which is evidence of some kind of an error.
The question
No,
is, have you done
the batch
settlement
settles
yet?
in the afternoon. We'll go to the credit card information, and here I can either add it to the vault, delete it from the vault, or update. So if I choose add and credit card, it will pass the credit card number. Okay, it says it's invalid. I know why it's invalid. It's invalid because it's already got the asterisks in it, and I concealed the edit box, and that's why it's not visible. We'll use the bank account instead because I know that nothing is in my account yet for my bank account. I wouldn't know my routing number by memory, so I entered it this morning before I came over here, but I do know my account number. So as I type it, I typed it in the wrong field, so we'll cut it and we'll paste it into the account number where it's got concealed, and I'll type in First Bank, which is the name of the bank, and the SEC code is always going to be the prearranged, and the account type is checking, and it's business, not personal, and then I can choose to add the credit card. Now, you're seeing missing information because of the concealed edit box again. So if I click credit, nope, that was a mistake. I shouldn't have clicked on credit card. I should have chosen add and bank. And apparently the account holder name is me. So we'll try it again. The account type has to be checking or savings. It is. Don't know why that's happening. I apologize. But that procedure is what you will see when you're working with the real app. I'm making it so that when you choose these 4 steps, we'll use check this time. Okay, and we'll load them. And we'll choose check. Again, it will give me the key value pairs that are necessary for a check. So it's got my information, which I'm sorry people are going to see, but we'll go ahead and run it. And it says the transaction was approved. So in the response, if I choose my customer name, there are the various actions that have occurred, and the most recent one is right now at 12:16 p.m. Here is the text response that comes back from NMI. Here is the JSON equivalent of that if you wanted to use JSON in order to post the payment into the customer's invoice. And here are some of the fields that are being populated. I've also given you the links to either the NMI portal or CardPoint. So if we log in again, and I click on transaction reports and change the date again to today's date, 06. There we have a batch that's not settled yet for $30. So I can view the transactions, and I could either run the void in Cha-Ching, or as long as I'm here in the merchant portal, I could do it here. And to do that, I would just click on the ID number of the transaction, and I could click the button for void, or I could click the button for refund. And as long as I void it before 5 o'clock, I won't be charged the $30. So I'm going to
All right, we are approaching the end of FMPug, and so now we're going to be opening up for questions, unless, Dennis, you had more you need to do. It's not quite time yet for you to hit that app yet. Almost.
7 minutes to go.
Almost. We're tracking it together.
So what I can do here in the URL builder is I'll run the void here. That should take less than 7 minutes. I'll change it from a sale to a void. The details are the same, including the transaction ID number, which really isn't right. I need to check that before running the refund. I should capture the transaction ID number. There it is. Now, I wouldn't have to do this online. The transaction ID number is one of the things that's captured in the app. So when I go here, I want to make sure that this is not the one that I voided this morning when I tested it. And then when I go to run the variables, instead of a sale, you've only got a few, and the transaction ID is one of them. So I will choose void variables, and it will put them in as the key value pairs when I click the void button. And then when I submit it, it should come back to me and say the transaction, it's calling it approved because what it did was it approved the void. But if I go back to the web page and refresh it, you will see that there's a 0 in today's batch. We'll go to the transaction report for today's date, 06. Okay, so then there's now nothing in today's batch because it got voided. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, well, I'm trying to make it helpful. If you were working with a virtual terminal, then it would be a different layout. The virtual terminal layout looks like this. You've still got your list of merchants. Your list of users might be multiple people within your company. If you wanted to assign each of them an ID number that would get passed with the transaction, I haven't finished the work on that yet, but the intention of that is that somebody in management could figure out who's been doing the transactions. And the virtual terminal basically just has a tab for a credit card and a tab for a check. And if any of these fields are completed, there would be a submit button that would be visible at the bottom. And again, there would be your list of customers. These lists are the same regardless. The only thing that's different with a virtual terminal is that you don't need to have all the key value pairs. You're just putting in what's necessary here. And if you were working with I don't want to forget, there's one other thing that we need to get into, and that's on the custom setup, there's more of an explanation, but it's basically filling in the same fields and using the minimal variables and doing it that way. Now, I have a version of this running in, let's see, in a server that's running as a virtual machine on my laptop. And the purpose of my doing that is to show you some of the add-on details. So here we're looking at the virtual machine, and if I run FileMaker there and I'm running the app this way, it looks the same. But when I go into layout mode and I choose the add-on button at the top and the plus button, you get all of Claris's various add-ons, but at the bottom you have the one for Cha-Ching. Now when you touch it, you see the description is missing. The created by is Claris. Neither of those are true. But this is one of the features that Claris has not addressed. In order to make this description work properly, what I had to do was go into we'll open both of these in TextEdit. That's the wrong one. Sorry, that's the document you will get. I didn't mean to open it twice. Somewhere on here, I Maybe it's on my laptop, not, oh, it's on the desktop of the virtual machine, sorry. I called it info_en for English, and the other one is called original. So if we open those, what FileMaker gives you when you build an add-on says description missing, category doesn't exist, there are no features, and the title happens to be correct. When you modify the JSON file and give it the details you want, then those are the things that will appear on the right-hand side. So back to Taylor's question, before I can distribute this either in the marketplace or if I were to email you the add-on file, what I would have to do first is modify that particular info file. And I'm only modifying the one that's in English because I'm not distributing into other languages. If I go to the library file to show you what's there, and I navigate to, let's go to application support, maybe, name, application support, FileMaker, extensions. Okay, so here is what got inserted when I received my add-on in a zip file from the marketplace, or you received it from me, or maybe I'll put it on my website where people can download it, as Taylor was saying. What happens when you unzip that file is you get all of these elements, and separate from what's in that cha-ching folder is this file, which is an add-on. If I view by icon, maybe it'll be a little bit clearer for those people who are logged in. If I click on add-on modules, there's the thing that I took a screenshot of yesterday to show you that it's called a plugin in the icon, but it's really got the add-on extension. Taylor.
Okay, great, we get that it works, and you're going to make it easy for us to sign up for it. But basically, kind of making a summary that how we look at it as developers is this is kind of like multi-level marketing, Amway Stream, something like that. And this is a way for us to tie in our clients, potentially save them money while getting us a little stream of extra money coming into us too regularly.
It starts with me at the top level of your Amway example, and the way that it's being divided is that your share of whatever income comes through the top level of that pyramid, so to speak, is going to be 4 times my share. So if there's $100 that is coming from a particular merchant, you're getting $80 of it, and I'm getting 20.
Okay.
That's what I call full disclosure.
Okay, right, certainly. But kind of the goal or the purpose for this is that we can see as developers, we're already out selling, we already have a whole bunch of clients, and if they're interested, particularly the win-win is if we can show our clients that, hey, here's a way to save some money on credit card processing, plus I would get a little kickback on it. And if so that's kind of the approach to selling to our clients.
I would suggest not focusing with your clients strictly on the money saving, but to focus on the security aspect within their company of using your privilege sets to determine who's permitted to do it, who's permitted to view it, who's permitted to log into the portal at the merchant in order to see reports. You have more control over that than you do if the customer just works on their own to establish credit card processing. Now, you don't need me. You could do the same thing I did if you want to establish a relationship with a merchant processor the way I did. I've been working with Card Connect now for enough years that when they call me and they say, what can you do to bring us more merchants? I'm at the point in my career where it's not likely to come from more FileMaker clients because I'm approaching retirement. But it could come from more FileMaker developers in the community. And I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe that not everybody is skilled or proficient in what payment processing is all about. I think there's a security aspect within any of your customers to make sure that only the right people are able to see the information and only the right people are allowed to process information. I once had my CPA teach me many years ago that there's a risk that any company has if an employee is making private deals with a customer. My former partner in the pen business spent some time in prison because the federal government caught him in a crime that involved giving credits that were unauthorized to customers. So if what he did was he said to a customer who owed the company, let's say $10,000, pay me 15 and I'll send you a kickback of 5. Or send your check to this other company and I'll post a credit to you in my company's accounting because I'm going to keep that money personally, but I could cook the books in my own company so that you appear to be paid. You don't want to have employees who are untrustworthy to make private deals with customers that are illegal. So when you build it all into FileMaker, you have that security benefit. And I think there's probably a productivity benefit as well by just making it as simple as clicking a couple of buttons in FileMaker rather than jumping over into a website and typing numbers there and then having to remember that it was approved, and you get distracted, maybe you forget, and you don't go back into the customer database to put the payment in. All of that can be a round trip. First thing you'll do is click the plus button at the bottom of your add-on, and you'll be able to choose it if it's already been unzipped and placed where it belongs. When you click the choose button, it will take about 60 seconds to go through the process of adding it to the sidebar of your add-ons. And it will optimize for about 20 seconds, and then there'll be another maybe 45 seconds after you drag it onto the layout. Spinning ball for the process to be complete. A few more tips to help you get started. When you open up the Cha-Ching app using the URL that I gave you on Friday, you won't need the username and password because I've made that an automatic login just to help you get to this point. When you click the setup button, which is the first thing you should do, it'll take you to the prospect form that I developed over the weekend. The purpose of this form is for me to know which developers have an interest in working with the Cha-Ching add-on before it is published in the Claris Marketplace. If you click the application button before you've entered that form, you'll be prompted to either go back to the form and put some information in it, or if you want, you can just stay on this layout and explore whatever the application form requires of people. When you do go back to the setup and you put something in, so we'll just type XYZ Corp, and we'll put in an email address, so it's my email address. And what will happen then is you'll see a blue submit button, it'll thank you, and then when you go to the application, it'll have whatever information you already typed pre-filled in for you. When the app is distributed as an add-on, it will have a full access account with the standard Claris admin account name, so that any developer will be able to modify the security credentials and create their own for their own purposes. And that is all I have to say. Thank you for your attention.
All right, we want to thank you all for joining us for FileMaker Pro Users Group for June with Dennis Burnham. It's been great. For those of you who are here present, we're going to go upstairs and enjoy a lovely salad bar. And for those of you who are not here, thanks for joining us remotely. If you're watching this later, and, thanks for watching it later. Yeah, that's great. Yes, there is a survey. It will be on the YouTube link when all is said and done. If you are in Teams, the link is there as well.